around the world and across a range of different perspectives to share with our students and faculty here and help make connections. CACR does this speaker series with a number of partners, including the Maurer School of Law, the Kelly School of Business, the Luddy School of Informatics Computing, the Ostrom Workshop, the Center for Women in Technology, and also today the Bachelor's in Cybersecurity and Policy, which is between the Hamilton Luger School and the Luddy School. So before I pass it to my colleague Isak to introduce the speaker, let me just give a quick thank you to Joe Tamain and Diana Simmer, who take on the organization for this speaker series. So I thank both of them and hope everyone shows up, returns for future talks. And if you don't get our announcements about that, please do just drop an email to cacr@iu.edu and ask to be added to our email list. With that, I hope to see you back on September 30th for Kim Milford to talk about the RANA ISAC, which is a really unique national cybersecurity resource hosted here at Indiana University. So with that, Isak, I welcome you onto the stage.
Thank you so much, Van. It's my sincere pleasure to introduce Enrique Zapata. Enrique is the coordinator of Govtech and data intelligence practices at the Development Bank of Latin America. Before that, he worked for 10 years in multiple positions in the government of Mexico, in which he served as the first head of the National Anti-Corruption Platform of Mexico and as the country's chief data officer at the Office of the President. Enrique serves currently as a board member of the International Open Data Charter, is part of the OECD's Open Data Experts Group, and is part of Apolitical's 100 Future Leaders list. He holds a Master in Public Policy degree from the University of Oxford at the Blavatnik School, and is a candidate for the Master of Data Science from the University of Avila, and holds a bachelor's degree in International Relations from the Universidad Iberoamericano in Mexico. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome him. Please join me in doing so. Enrique, the floor is to you.
Thank you very much, Isaac, and thank you very much, Vaughn, Joseph, Diana, for the invitation and for coordinating this talk, and thank you very much for the faculty and students of the CACR in Indiana University. I'm afraid that Isaac's been very generous in presenting me and in saying who I am. When I think about myself and my past through government and my current work, I think of me as in someone that makes things happen. And what I found out in my professional life is that there is a great need in government, but also in the private sector and in academia, in media, in every sector. There's a great need of people who knows how to bring ideas to reality. And that is a great part of what I am going to speak about right now. Right now, you should be seeing my screen. And I'll be talking about Govtech. Govtech as a mechanism for delivery, and specifically how I see and we see from the Development Bank of Latin America that this Govtech thing can help deliver what you're doing right now. First and foremost, in my personal experience and what I currently see around the world from various multilateral institutions like the OECD, from the bank, and from various boards and institutions with whom I work with, is that strategy and plans are more or less made like this. When a big politician, a minister, secretary of state has a great idea, they go to the next in line and say, you know, you should be doing a strategy. That person will go to the next in line and say, we need a plan. In the best of the worlds, what you would end up with, it's a plan and great ideas, make regulation. And after regulation, in the very least of the best worlds that we can have, that regulation ends up being applied and delivered in some kind of way. In many places in the world, especially in emerging and development countries, that delivery simply does not happen. If you would see and compare what our laws in Mexico, in Colombia, in Brazil, Argentina, in Eastern Europe or in Asia says against what the reality of government and life is, those two doesn't match. And they don't match because governments do not have the capacity and the vision, the understanding of the world that we currently live in. The world that we live in right now, and this is a very important part to understand the motivation around or behind what Govtech is for us in the bank, is part of a human evolution in the place that we are as community and as society. The best way that people relate to this is by saying that we live in a fourth industrial revolution. You can see here the four revolutions that we have. The first, mechanization. We, as humanity, passed from having horses in the street to having cars. With cars, we then had streets, highways, lights, electricity. Then we had mass production and the coming of the capitalist and mass producing and also consuming society. Then in the 50s, 60s, 70s, up to the 90s, we had a computer and automation revolution, which we have for the first time a connected, interconnected world, practically living in real time, but with a crucial and very important difference from what we have right now. Back then, I remember I was born in 1984, right? So I remember when I first logged into internet, we had the modem with weird sounds, just having the handshake so that you can log on to internet. And people, institutions saw digital technologies and saw the connectivity that we have, the World Wide Web, as a tool. And this is a very important thing because when you see technology as a tool, you immediately differentiate yourself between who you are and what digitalization is. That was true a couple of decades ago. Right now, it is done. It is not. And this is a crucial message that I want to pass. Right now, the fact that we live in a so-called fourth industrial revolution means that we live in what you see here, a cyber physical system, a reality in which we have our physical world interconnected and being influenced and influencing the digital reality in which we also live in. It is not only about us having this talk right now through digital means. It is the fact that you can go to a city center, put Google Maps on, and see where you want to go in real time. It is the fact that you can have a rant on Twitter against a government agency that does not deliver the service that we want as citizens. And if they are doing their job right and they understand the world that we live in, they would come back to you with a response. If they don't, as in most parts of the world, they would completely forget about it and just say, you know, this crazy citizen is saying bad things about government. The fact that we live in a cyber-physical system means, in other words, in simpler words, that technology and digital is no longer a tool. It is a medium. It is the medium in which we live in. And it's the way that we need to understand how to apply and to deliver any kind of digital agenda, including what cybersecurity, what it means, and its implications in society for citizens and for institutions. Now, this reality happens at the same time that we have incredible and very complex challenges as humanity, practically in every single place in the world. We have a demographic boom everywhere. We're simply too many people. And most of these persons, around 70–75%, live in cities. They're just crammed in very specific places. And what that means is that governments need to increase the capacities they need to deliver services and to respond to these crazy amounts of people crammed in cities. Not only in terms of having a license, your driving license online, or having your garbage recollected at the same time and place every single day, which is something that you might have as a given in a developed country, but many people around the world does not. It means security, and it means very internal and not necessarily evident services that government provides to the society in general that we need so that we can continue functioning as we do. This demographic and the need for the demographic explosion and the need for capacities also exist in a world which is extremely complex. And when I say complex, I don't mean that it's complicated. I'm not saying that it's difficult. It is, but it's not what I mean. It means that it's complex in the complex academic sense of the world, in which systems and their interaction, feedback loops, the behaviors of the actors in the system, and the rules of the systems in which we live in create emergent behaviors, create emergent secondary systems which we need to understand and that governments need to understand, because what ends up happening if you don't understand what you're doing is that you, with the best of the ideas, ends up doing a good thing in one part of government and you end up screwing 10 other things that you didn't even imagine in other places. Complexity is a real thing, and it's one of the most pressing challenges the governments need to tackle. At the same time, you have a resistance to change in practically every institution in the world. It might be generational, although, or in part generational, but it also has to do with the averse to risk, with the very erroneous view that when you do not achieve success in something, it means that you failed. Currently, in the world that we live in, when you understand that something does not work, it's a great success. You know that you shouldn't be going to the left, you should be going to the right, or at least you need to go in another direction. And finally, you have all this happening in an environment in which the public sector does not have the necessary financial resources to tackle every single thing and every single challenge that we have. We simply do not have the budgets. You're in the United States and you have the grace of having the Fed printing money. It would eventually maybe end up badly, but at least you have that. Many, if not most part of the world, do not have that capacity. We do not have the budgets to tackle these things. And we have a very important, very basic decision to make when you're a finance minister in saying, why should I be investing my limited resources of money, taxpayer money, in cybersecurity and not in buying more beds for people dying of COVID? Think about that. That is how governments work. That is a very, you're also immersed in the international affairs kind of ideology. That is a very realpolitik view of the world, but that's how it happens. And those are the kinds of decisions and making points that you need to understand when you're trying to make an idea, a knowledge, something real in the world. What we end up having is basically 20th century institutions that need to address 20th century challenges for 20th century citizens. If you push me a bit more, those 20th century institutions come from ideas and ideals of the 18th, 19th, and maybe other centuries before that. We need to change. We need to find ways in which to reset government, in which to reimagine the world and the interconnections that we have between the public sector and the other sectors and us as citizens to address the challenges that I was talking about. Hopefully for us, in the midst of the challenge and the great tragedy that COVID-19 has meant for everyone in the world, it has also created a great opportunity for everything that relates to digital technologies. And that is these three words that I put here. It created a tangible, a real, and a short-term urgency for governments to act. When you're a minister, when you're a president, when you're maybe undersecretary or vice minister, you're not making policy. You're basically making politics. And politics is very short-term. And what this is doing is, for the first time, these people have in mind the digital agenda as something priority and relevant for their own futures, and for the futures of them as politicians and high-level decision makers in the government. And we, you and the people that are technical, that are making policy, not politics, have an opportunity to grab on that and to reimagine and understand ways in which these people can make the digital agenda, cybersecurity, and other issues reality. Now it comes to Govtech. For us, Govtech is one of the possible mechanisms, one of the possible policy tools that we currently have to make that digital agenda and those issues happen in reality. And I want to be very clear on this. I am not saying the Govtech is the silver bullet that will solve the world's problem. It is not. In fact, if anyone ever tells you that they have the silver bullet for any issue, run in the other direction and don't ever talk with them again, because they're lying. The world in which we live in does not have a silver bullet solution for the problems we have, at least for the public ones. This is just a tool that should be and is being used along with other policy tools, you name it, user-centered design, behavioral science, data science, citizen participation, et cetera, et cetera. This is something that you can use to make things happen and to deliver, to bring things again, and I'm going to repeat this over and over again, to bring ideas into reality, to change the world, the physical world that we live in. What is Govtech? This is also very important. Govtech is not digital government agenda. Government is an ecosystem. What an ecosystem means is that it has many parts and it has many interactions between those parts. An ecosystem that has two main general actors. One, the government, the public sector. At any level, you can say national, local, regional, even single institutions. Then you have the innovative private sector, and specifically innovative data-driven startups that have a lot of expertise in new technologies, from every single thing on AI that you can imagine, to cybersecurity, to blockchain, to data science, to drones, whatever. And that these two actors collaborate in certain ways that can help governments to solve public problems. Another way in which you can think about Govtech is the use of that digital medium, which I said that we currently live in, as a mechanism to solve the problems that we have. The reason, and the very single reason that I am talking about digital technologies right now, is simply because it's the most efficient technology that we have as humanity. The moment in which digital is not the single most efficient tool, we will be talking about other things. Quantum cybersecurity. If we were talking a couple of centuries ago, we would be talking about, the printing press, or stone cybersecurity, one caveman against other caveman, and how the security is when you have a stone in hand. This only relates to the digital technology because it's again, the most efficient thing that we have. Govtech also means for the public sector a couple of other things that we see as developers of impact and of greater citizen, in this case, security, but also productivity and innovation. The first one, and probably the most important, is that it is not only a strategy to create public sector capacities, but it is also an economic strategy. And this is very important in the times that we live in, which we need to reactivate our economies. At least, and at the very minimum, it's a $450 billion market. This is basically all government spending in the world for digital related things. If you then make this idea not only for digital, but for every single thing that governments do, what you end up having is basically every single dollar spent on government spending for any public related issue as part of the Govtech potential. That is in the trillions. What this is making is also, apart from delivering capacity, detonating this new economic sector, especially in the micro, medium SMEs. It's creating value added and productivity. And this is very important for the kind of economies that we have right now. We need micro SMEs that are creating value and that are productive. In the United States, it's a problem, but it's not as relevant as in many parts of the world. For example, in Latin America, these are two of the most important economic problems that we have. Our SMEs are, the hairdresser or the little restaurant or little shop around the corner. They're not creating a lot of value with the products and the inputs that they have. These new kinds of Govtech SMEs that work with government are creating value and have the potential to kind of push the economy and the potential of the economy at least to a higher sphere to then hopefully create more economic growth. It also, the Govtech mentality is aimed at creating not only economic rentability, which is basically the traditional public-private relation of, government, I have a provider and I procure anything that I want, but it is also creating social impact. What we are seeing and documenting is that these new type of SMEs have impact embedded in their mentality. It's, again, probably generational, but it's also what we also are seeing and documenting with real evidence is that these new businesses understand that the well-being of their localities, of their communities, of their governments directly relates to the potential economic return that they can have. It is no longer only about creating rents or cannibalizing, the other businesses. It's about creating a sustainable economic environment that can create that economy while creating the impact and addressing the big complex challenges that I already talked about. And lastly, which is evident, but it's important, it creates and promotes innovation. And innovation, when I talk about innovation, I'm not only saying, you should be doing a new product or a new service from thin air. It's in understanding that there are new mentalities and new processes of thinking about past problems that can help us address those past problems in a better, more efficient way. That is what I understand and what I want to communicate when I talk about innovation. Now, a couple of years ago, we were talking about Govtech just in a very abstract, the Govtech community, we're talking about this in the very abstract sense of the world. We were creating a narrative. When you're in government, or in the public sector, working with governments, you need to create narratives. You need to create a story to tell people, such as the one that I'm actually telling you right now. But what we also did at the same time is to make a model about how this Govtech ecosystem works. And the very general and basics of that model is here. As I was saying, you have two actors, and then at the middle, you have those communicating vessels. You have many, but the most important are first data. The reason why data is one of those communicating vessels is because it's the basic building block of every single digital technology that we have right now. It's as simple as that. Data is the most important asset that we as humanity have right now. And the other one is procurement. The contracting mechanism in which governments can talk or relate to the private sector to make things happen. Procurement for you might be a very boring issue, and in fact it is. But something being boring, it does not mean that it's important. The reason why procuring and public procurement is very important, it's because it is the only mechanism available for any government in the world to materialize policy into reality. If you contract people and human resources to work in government, that's fine. You're procuring, you're making a contract with your director or whoever works with you in your team. If you're procuring a highway, you're procuring a spaceship, or if you're procuring a system or a team around cybersecurity, this is the only way that governments can make this happen. And this is very important because procurement and new ways of doing procurement are paramount, not only for Govtech, the issue at hand, but for the basically wider digital agendas that we have right now. And at the bottom, of course, you have delivery. Again, delivery meaning bringing ideas into reality and changing the world that we live in, making something different. Now, as of now, I've talked about the narrative and the motivations, the background of Govtech, what Govtech is. Now I want to talk about impact. What is really happening on the ground around these, and I want to focus specifically on cybersecurity issues at hand. So the first one and the first two case studies are relate to specific startups, to specific Govtech businesses that are currently working with governments to create a change in cybersecurity arena. The first one is, or are these guys called VU. VU is an Argentinian startup that from 2017 started working with the national government in Argentina to create their digital identity system. What they basically did is to create a secure environment in which every single Argentinian citizen can have their phone or their computer, have a video or an image taken in real time. Then they take an image of their national identity card. And those two things would go to a secure channel to the National Registry of Persons, which is a central repository of every single person that lives in Argentina and is an Argentinian citizen, which is basically a very general way in which all governments work. They match two things to say, you know, in fact, what you're seeing is Enrique at the other side of the computer or of the phone. And then this allows for a more rapid validation or providing of citizen services. This changed dramatically the way in which Argentinian citizens relate to the government in a country which, as you may know, it's very wide, it's very vast, such as the United States. When you're a country like Israel, Singapore, Japan, Estonia, most of the European countries, you don't have that much issue around moving with geographies. But if you're Argentina, if you're Brazil, Mexico, Russia, China, then you have that problem. And these new systems are changing the way in which at least Latin America and some other countries in Africa and in Asia are relating to their citizens and reaching out to those citizens very far away in remote areas. The second case study is these guys called Cyan Forensics. These guys are working with the government of the United Kingdom, basically to tackle sexual offenders and child pornography, along with terrorism. What they did is to create an algorithm that assists, as I'm saying here, officers in identifying categories of the severity of illegal images that they find in the computers of offenders, and detect what specific crime they're talking about. And they're not only allowing this process to be more efficient and quicker, they're also doing something very important. They're allowing for officers not to see those images, because again, this is terrorism, this is organized crime, this is child pornography. These are very high impact images that affect the people in the other side of the screen, which are seeing and screening this. These guys already have a massive contract with the government of the UK and are basically re-engineering the way in which the United Kingdom identifies and address, again, terrorism and pedophilia. These two case studies are specific startups. What I also wanted to talk about, and thinking about many of you, specifically the ones that are, which are students, is in other ways in which you could be doing cybersecurity in government or promoting cybersecurity. So you can be in a very, let's call it pure cybersecurity team doing specific cybersecurity things, great. You could be a startup such as Cyan Forensics or VU doing your thing from the private sector. But you could also be what I call an enabler of this ecosystem. The actors and the institutions, the mechanisms that allow this dialogue and this work to happen. One of the most important around cybersecurity is the NCSC for startups in the UK, which is basically an incubator and accelerator of startups around very specific problems that the UK have. And in this case, cybersecurity is one of them. At the start of the talk, I was talking about the quality and the necessity to be efficient in the way that you use budget if you don't have money. What they're finding is that this new generation of solutions are cheaper and are better quality than existing cybersecurity solution coming from big techs, and even better quality and cheaper that those solutions being developed by the own government for the own government, because that's something that governments do. Also think about having big teams that should be doing everything and have the expertise around AI, blockchain, cybersecurity. That is not the case. Governments should not do everything. They should enable specific expertise to be brought in and absorbed into government at the right times and for very specific concrete objectives. I was also talking about delivery capacities. What they in the UK found out, or basically saw, is that the government basically did not have competitive salaries for cybersecurity experts to come into government, basically. So they need to find a way in which to relate to the private sector in which that expertise exists in a better way. And this is it. Impact is, well, a given because of what they're doing. And they're also promoting this as an economic development tool for, again, the SMEs that have high productivity and value added for the economics of the United Kingdom. I'm not going to talk about the challenges that they are doing around cybersecurity. You can read them here, and I will, of course, pass the presentation on. But basically, the way in which this accelerator works is the following. The government decides very specific challenges, problems that they want to address with the startups. That's stage one. Stage two, they ask the startups to have an ideation process in which they will propose ideas in which those problems will be addressed. As many ideas as you can imagine. They will, with a committee of experts, evaluate which of those ideas are best, which of them can be implemented, and then ends up giving a very little grant, well, a grant to pilot those initiatives. They will again evaluate those pilots and agree on which is the pilot that should be, and in fact will be scaled as a national solution for any of the problems that was identified at first. What I just described is basically the methodology that every single public challenge program and Govtech innovation program works in the world. Of course, I'm being general, I'm not being very specific in the stages, but it's basically to give you an idea of how you can help detonate this sector in another way, that it's not as evident, but that it's very important to create the dialogue space between government and this innovative private sector. The fourth and last case study revolves around procurement, again, because it's very important. And I put two cases here. The first in India, they created this called public procurement order specifically for cybersecurity products, in which they mandated that every single cybersecurity solution, product or service being bought by the Indian government should be allocated to Indian startups. Now, you can definitely have challenged that idea of Indian also, or buy American or buy Canadian, buy whatever. That is a very protection from a global perspective. That is a very protectionist policy to have. That being said, from a cybersecurity Govtech SME promotion strategy, it's a very good one and a very, very efficient one. So another lesson that you can have from what I'm saying is that in most decisions that you will make when working with or for the public sector, you will have to balance between policy options and policy objectives, and to understand what is the best for your government, for yourself as a person with a moral compass, and make that happen. What this public procurement order end up being or creating for the Indian population is that the capital investment allocated for these cybersecurity solutions reduced by 60%. Imagine that you have 100%. You were spending 100% of your budget, and you reduced that by 60% for cybersecurity solutions. That is a massive amount of dollars not being spent in this in cybersecurity, while having the best solutions, and that can be allocated to other needs for the population and the government. And as a very concrete case study, you can investigate the startup that is called White Jungle, which is currently working with 15 ministers and the Prime Minister's office around basically all the cybersecurity strategy for India. More or less the same thing is currently happening in Spain as of this year. They just announced the allocation of 224 million euros for the next 3 years in specific procurement of innovation through an accelerator and a public challenge program such as the one I described that is being implemented in the UK, and that it would have a very specific vertical to address cybersecurity issues in Spain and in the European Union. At least 86 million euros out of the whole will be directly allocated to this kind of government startups, so that you can imagine the potential that these governments are seeing in the Govtech sector. Now, and I'm just heading to the last 2 slides of this talk so that you can know more or less about what we're doing from the bank, Development Bank of Latin America, to detonate this ecosystem. Last year, we launched this platform called the Govtech Lab, which is basically our portfolio of products and services in which we're currently working with governments. We have a big analytics or knowledge arm in which we released also last year a report on the state of Govtech for Latin America, Spain, and Portugal. The reason why we have a limited view on these reports is that those are the members of the bank. We are basically a World Bank for Latin America. And we are just about to launch a report on procurement of innovation to understand and to recommend to any government in the world how they should be procuring new technologies, most of them that have not ever been adopted in government, which is a big problem for governments all over the world. We're also working in a metrics arm. We launched the 2020 Govtech Index. This is the first effort, global effort, to understand and to rank countries in the world and to model the Govtech ecosystem as I showed a couple of minutes ago. And currently, we're working in a Govtech City Index in which we will be ranking at least 30 cities in the region, plus Spain and Portugal, with an open methodology, which anyone can replicate. And if you want, you could replicate it in the United States at the local or at the national level to understand, not only to rank. I mean, my objective is not to say you're the best and you're the worst. My objective is to understand what are the opportunity areas in which specific countries and specific cities should be working to detonate this system. Being a development bank, we are also big on advising and working specifically with countries and giving them money, basically technical resources to develop Govtech policies so that you can have an idea of what we do. We just launched the first ever public investment program for a municipal level in Argentina, with a municipality called Cordoba, first ever in Latin America. We are working with the government of Colombia to develop an holistic national Govtech policy. We're working with a couple of local governments in Spain to develop their public challenge programs, such as the one that I described. And we're working with very specific projects and startups to develop solutions for governments. For example, with Mexico City, we're actually working in digitalizing the whole procurement and licitation process, while also having a couple of algorithms to detect the risk of corruptions. We also have an investing arm. We not only work with governments so that they can have their investment programs, but have developed and are investing currently in Govtech startups. We just announced the first 2, which are these ones: OS City from Mexico and Argentina, and CityBits from Spain. And in a couple of weeks, we will be announcing the second batch, and are currently working in the second stage of our investment program that will be launched in 2022. And lastly, the first week of October, we will be launching a Govtech Observatory, which is basically a crowdsourced platform to identify where these Govtech startups are, what are they doing, who they are working with, what's the revenue, what's the economy that they're creating, how many jobs they are creating, to have evidence of not only the kind of horizontal stretch that governments can be grabbing upon to create new capacities, but also the depth of the sector from an investment perspective. In the rest of this year and kind of plans for the future, we will be releasing, no, actually we released that today, a Govtech Readiness Index, which is again an open methodology so that governments and specific institutions can help assess themselves and understand what actions they should be doing when wanting to create a Govtech program, as in general, or for a very specific sector such as cybersecurity. In October, we will be launching the Global Govtech Alliance with 15 local and national governments from all around the world, basically a G2G network to exchange best practices, what works and what not, and to push kind of the Govtech agenda in the global sphere through very concrete commitments. Our second round of the investment program, we will be releasing the Cities Index and the report for public procurement of innovation. And lastly, if you take and bring home just 3 things from everything that I've said, please just go with these 3. The first one is that to create success, you don't only need the brains and the knowledge, you need to bring that into reality through delivery capacities and through very concrete expertise. That is very important when you go out in the world and want to actually make things happen. The second is that one of these possible mechanisms to change the reality in which we live in is Govtech. And this is a very new strategy, a very new topic all over the world, in which we are continuously and day to day evolving and developing. And thus is a great opportunity for any of you, being faculty or being students, wanting to just address or to imagine new ways of doing things. And that, again, Govtech can bring you an opportunity, specifically thinking about students, of when you come out of this program and on the university, of how you can develop your professional life. This is it from my side. I thank you very much, everyone, for the invitation, and more than open to dialogue, which is the good part of these talks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Enrique. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to start off with some questions. I really thought that it was really quite interesting that you speak about GovTech from the perspective of it being a strategy, almost really a methodology, right? More than just sort of this teleological, like GovTech is government using technology. Could you maybe speak a little bit about so you spoke about how we get things to work in government with technology, right? But like, maybe speak a little bit about what are the proper strategies for GovTech? Like when you're thinking about the methodology, like what's the key to this methodology?
The key is the dialogue space between the public and the private sector. When you work in government, and I've seen this all over the world, and actually it happens a lot in the US, at least at the national level. I had, before being Mexico Chief Data Officer, I was part of the team that managed NAFTA, back then it was NAFTA, and had a lot of interaction with the US government. And what ends up happening is that the government acts alone based on the assumptions that certain public officers have around the world that they live in.
Right.
Now, that does not mean that these people do not know what they should be doing. It just means that they have an information asymmetry against the others. So you need to create the spaces in which government can talk with other sectors, in this case, the innovative private sector, to understand the reality of the problems that you face, the potential ways of addressing those problems, and the potential collaboration initiatives that you can have. So that space is key to bring this GovTech idea into reality. The way in which you mechanize or operationalize that space can vary from government to government. And in fact, it is good that it varies, because that variation, what means is that any government can contextualize the way in which they relate to this other sector based on their own necessities in their own context, in their own mentalities, ideas, and capacities. It is not the same, the US government talking with, Silicon Valley than Sao Paulo talking with innovative private sector in Brazil.
Right.
So that mechanism have a very specific methodology, and I describe it with 4 stages, but can vary. And I would say that this is the very basic of starting a Govtech program. Now, that is for the short term, and that is important because then what you can have with Govtech is to create very quick, easy wins.
Right.
At the same time, it is important to have a medium and long-term vision around what you want to achieve with your strategy.
Right.
That is the motivation behind the publication of this Govtech Readiness Assessment Guide, which we published today. So the very concrete answer would be to work in 2 ways: a strategy and a vision in the future, but in a very concrete public challenges program that can help create evidence and make people understand that this is a good idea.
Right. That's excellent. And so as a follow-up, as someone's asked in the chat, they said during this 4th cyber physical systems revolution and government resets, do you expect that the average world citizen will continue to experience continued loss of personal freedoms, things like speech, movement, privacy, body autonomy, etc.? And what is Govtech doing to promote, preserve, and guarantee existing personal freedoms?
What a question. Look, freedom, privacy, and all the things that you mentioned are ideologies, which I understand that you believe in. I also believe in them. Basically, the Western world believes in, but there are many parts of the world, many governments, many citizens that do not. So the answer, the first part of the answer, would be that technology has a dual use. You can use it in this case to protect privacy, to have security, to create autonomy, to continue living our individual lives as the ones that you and I live in this part of the world. But you can also use them, as many countries are already using them, to track citizens, to rank citizens, to spy citizens, right? So that does not have to do with technology. It doesn't have to do with Govtech. It has to do with the way that the government works and the kind of government that we, or that citizens in the...
But certainly there's some element of, like, when you speak about Govtech as a methodology, as a strategy, right? I mean, certainly there's some element where we can think in a society where we value these things, right? That we're making sure that we're integrating these, as sort of a design principle of these new technologies that we're procuring and designing and deploying. Maybe could you speak about that? Like, how do we, so I mean, in the context of places that don't value these things, okay, fine. But in the context of places that do, how within the Govtech strategy that you've spoken about, are we sort of making a space to protect these?
Yeah. So I think it has to do with the equation of not only bringing economic revenue, but also creating impact, and to have a relationship, a government relationship with the private sector that is not only a providing relationship, but a working together relationship to certain goals. Yeah. Many of the ways of protecting these ideas that we have come from regulations. And I know that many of the faculty and the students come from the law and the policy sphere. And this has to do a lot with how Govtech develops. If you're in a country which have a very clear cybersecurity strategy, a clear regulation around personal data protection with laws such as the one that you have in Mexico, we have. If you have very concrete strategies around what data can be used and open for what and when, then you're developing a Govtech ecosystem that it's, or that relates to these ideologies and values that we have as societies. When you don't, maybe Govtech is not the first idea or the first thing that you should be focusing on, which is also a very relevant idea. Mm-hmm. This is Govtech, as many digital government strategies or issues in digital government strategies, has to come and has to be implemented at a very specific place in the development of an overall policy agenda.
Right.
Your problem is that you don't have a personal data protection law. You should be focusing on having one first, and then in all the rest. Because then, if you don't, you have a very tangible possibility of screwing everything up and end up doing more wrong than good with the
But then,
government.
so then feeding back to something you said earlier about why it's difficult to do this in government, particularly in the developing world, you know, so on the one hand, we're saying, let's do GovTech, right? It's going to create all this impact. It's going to save money. It's going to solve all these problems, going to make all these efficiencies. But then we say, so they're sold like, yeah, let's do GovTech. You say, wait, actually, first go and pass some legislation on data protection. How do you, like, how when you're actually in the room making these things happen, like, how do you navigate those two things when people have very short attention spans as well, right?
Absolutely. The way that at least we're seeing it works in this region, and I know that in the US is a way of doing things, is piloting.
Right.
And building concrete evidence-based policy making before doing the delivery side of things or the regulatory part of things.
Right.
And that is a very good way of just addressing and pushing or progressing in those two kind of tracks.
Right. So another question here, someone's asked about, and I say someone, people have asked to stay anonymous. So is asked about procurement. And so you speak about procurement as the way that government, makes everything happen. And then you gave some case studies about sort of the procurement of cybersecurity tools, right? But we haven't talked at all, and I personally haven't read much about the cybersecurity of the procurement process, right? So maybe could you speak a little bit again at the bank, because I know you're putting out these tools for policymakers on procurement generally. What type of thinking is going on around sort of improving that the procurement process, particularly as relates to things like cybersecurity?
That's a very good question, and it actually brings a lot of thinking into my mind. I would speak about a very concrete project that we're doing, the one that we're doing in Mexico City, which we're digitalizing the procurement process. One of the very important parts that we're building is what we're calling a digital vault. Right. The idea and the motivation, the objective behind this vault is not cybersecurity or vulnerabilities around the security of the process as such, but the potential of another actor coming in and breaking the procurement process for their benefit, which is a very complex way of saying corrupt behavior, right?
Right.
So we're the basics of how this vault works is that we have an algorithm that has embedded the rules of the regulation around how procurement, specifically for national licitations or open processes, should be done. Another rules that we created around timing, about the way that people interact with the tool, and the IPs from which these actors are logging into the procurement system. And then building encryption processes so that for example, not two proposals can come from the same IP or for at least same, in Mexico, it's called kind of neighborhoods. For example, I know that the exact word in the United States. So we're building those processes to kind of prevent the security of or the potential for corrupt behavior. So I hope that kind of answers the question, but I do not know any specific case of kind of cybersecurity, concrete pure cybersecurity issue around procurement processes, nor any project trying to build something similar, which is a great opportunity for the anonymous person asking this.
Fantastic. And so I think I have just time for one last question, and then I'll hand over to Joe to round us out. But I know, so personally, I know that you've always really focused on global connectivity, right? And so, like, for example, when you've launched Mexico's AI strategy, national digital strategy, et cetera, the focus was on, okay, well, how now do we take these learnings as sort of the first place in Latin America to do this and then spread this across, the continent and then make global connections. Could you speak now, because now you're in a position where you're working across countries, right, to sort of build GovTech strategies, et cetera, of the importance of sort of global, global collaboration in this field?
Yes, it's good to bring the Mexico AI strategy, because it was actually Isaac who helped us develop this and has
Thanks for saying that.
I think that creating collaboration spaces is the best way to go, and to create communities. For not speaking about the cybersecurity things of the program, the undergraduate program, but on the public affairs part of things, it's something called micro-multilateralism, which is something that we increasingly see happening around the world. When you talk about digital, for example, you have the Digital Nations Initiative, the so-called most advanced digital countries in the world. You have the Open Data Charter, which I'm part of, speaking about open data. You have the Govtech Leaders Alliance, which we are about to launch specifically to kind of build these relationships. But you also have a lot of, first, you have another multilateral institutions working heavily on these issues. For me, the OECD is probably the most important one. The digital team is very serious, very well intentioned, because motivated, because that's important when you talk with multilateral institutions, and a lot of potential there, as well as in the UN, specifically in UNICEF. They have a UNICEF innovation program in which they not only work with children and maternal things, but in innovative ways of addressing the sustainable development goals. So you have that. You also have other forums in civil society, the Open Government Partnership, the Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency. You have a couple cybersecurity bodies being created in the G20 and in the OECD as well. So for me, what is the future of creating these ecosystems and pushing this agenda is through these mechanisms,
right,
and in building these collaboration spaces. Again, I'm a firm and true believer that in the world that we live in, no single actor should be doing anything alone. And it's only through collaboration which we can truly achieve a very important, relevant solutions to the challenges that we have.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Enrique.
I'll hand over to you.
So Enrique, thank you for such a wonderful start to the IU CACR Speaker Series for the 2021-22 year. That was wonderful. Thank you to Isaac for helping run the Q&A, and to Hamilton Lugar School and to the Luddy School for co-hosting this event. I'll just leave it with our next event will be September 30th with IU's own Kim Milford, who is the Executive Director of REN ISAC. Thank you to all who came today. I hope you guys have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Enjoy the day.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.